First of all, hi, how are you?
Good to see you.
It's wonderful to see you as well. Thank you for joining me on this sort of little down the memory lane walk through an um, unbelievable tenure that you had 25 years with the Cabrillo Festival, where you defined so much of what this festival is and it has become. And I'm, of course, personally grateful for giving me this unbelievable wealth of beautiful, wonderful, meaningful work that now I get to enjoy every year. So I feel a little guilty every time I every time I'm there because I know that there was so much that you put into this festival becoming what it has become. So first of all, thank you for that.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And of course um, I'm always curious because when I went to Cabrillo first time and I started my first season, there was so much that I learned that it's impossible to imagine from the outside. You know, it's such a Santa Cruz is such a unique place that even if you talk about it, it's just unless you experience it, it really does not do it justice. So I'm curious, first of all, as a community, how did you see it change, or did it change during the 25 years?
Well, it was really it was an interesting start because it was just after the that major earthquake. So that was a that was a huge blow to the community, and it was to the whole region, of course. So there was a deep struggle that everyone was embarked on, but it was a journey about community and rebuilding. And so I think right away I had a sense of the kind of, let's all roll up our sleeves and do the work together, that kind of commitment everyone had. And so, of course, that was a moment when the festival was very shaky because the finances were difficult, of course, as a result of the earthquake. And also having someone new trying to redefine or trying to figure out what the definition would be for the future. But I think, the beauty for me is that it's like my relationships. I don't make friends like right away, but I make friends who stay with me for dozens of years. And so that's how it felt with the community in Santa Cruz, and of course with the orchestra and with the listeners and with the composers too.
Mm-mm. Well, you've built this not just the concept and the idea behind what the festival is, but also the orchestra that you built, which is remarkable. I mean, I remember hearing you talk about this before there was anything about me being involved in Cabrillo, and I remember seeing videos and you talking about the fact that this is really truly remarkable, beautiful.
Yeah, it's an exceptional group of human beings. I think that, I hope that that's something that can can really define every project that I'm involved with. That the people I want to attract to the project are the people that have the right motivations
Mm.
and are in it for the right reasons. And I think, the fact that all these musicians really give up their lives in a way to come and be there and be present and work so hard in preparation for all of this difficult music. And then they work in the rehearsals, and I know you've found this because they tell me the same, as hard as any orchestra on the planet, if not harder. And, there's no expectation of the usual rewards. The reward of money doesn't exist really. The reward of, huge press acclaim, that doesn't really exist there. But the real importance exists there. So they get the reward of, first of all, each other, and that kind of coming together. The reward of working with great conductors like you, working with great soloists, and working with the voices of today, which is really important. I think musicians love to understand what composers are doing. It's so critical. and having the composers there that they can interact with, and then the audience. So I think they're coming again for the right reasons, and the rewards are not how we usually measure them. And I think there's an incredible beauty in that as well.
Absolutely, and this is something that it's also representative, I think, of the kind of community that surrounds the festival. I was so, for me, one of the most shocking things was, walking into the first rehearsal, and then I said, oh, okay, well, maybe a lot of people came to see the rehearsal because they were curious about the new person here, and they wanted to see about this. And I said, okay, well, this will probably die down by tomorrow, and it didn't. And it's like that every single time, and it's amazing to me to see the community embrace the process so much and be so interested in the creative process.
But Ellen and I, we really sat down to strategically figure out how to create a center for, when you think of new music, that your audience expectations start to dwindle to very, very small. But instead, we started speaking about, how to create a destination for creativity. Mm-hmm. So it's not just about contemporary music, but it's the idea of the creative human spirit and how we can tap into that and continue that. And I think that has been so compelling, especially for open-minded people who like to challenge themselves and think outside the box. And that's how I view the community there in Santa Cruz. And see, as we're talking about it, I'm thinking, why did I ever leave? But, it's also from my perspective, it's so important also to have new ideas and new avenues and to always be challenging the community, the orchestra in new ways, which is what your leadership will do.
Well, and from the very beginning, this is one thing that I've always said, and it's so true, and I see this. And I think I wrote you a message about this, but now that I can tell you directly as well, I was so grateful because it was a very, very difficult thing to imagine, being able to take over after 25 years of a very, very successful tenure. And what I really appreciated that it became very obvious to me is that you at every turn made the festival about the right things. So you didn't try to make it this is about me and what. No, it had the focus that put the priorities in the right place. And this was a huge lesson for me, as this was my first music director position. Mm-hmm. And it was an incredible lesson for me to be able to see and to say, okay, this is how you navigate a 25-year successful tenure at a festival, which then after the departure, it remains with the right priorities and standards in place. So thank you for that. This is
I appreciate you saying that too. I do think that I can't minimize the fact that I had such an excellent team of people, small but mighty. Let's put it that way. And I think also having the incredible generosity of the musicians, that they come with the right attitude and they come prepared and they can't wait. And, nothing pleased me more than getting all those emails. Are you sure Rouse means 176 to the quarter? I loved it. Is that a B flat? The months before. And, this kind of joy was absolutely wonderful. And I really do miss it a lot.
Yeah, well, we will find a way for you to come back and be with us again. And at least for now, this is a small little portion.
No, I think this is great that you're doing this also, because this is when you only are able to gather for 2 weeks a year, and then that's taken away from you. I had one summer where I broke my wrist, and so I had to suddenly change everything. And it really felt like just a terrible withdrawal. So I imagine that all of the listeners and musicians are all feeling that kind of withdrawal from the Cabrillo Festival right now.
Yeah. I will experience it. We will experience it. As every day goes by.
Right, as August approaches, yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So we'll see. So I wanted to ask you a couple of questions because you had some, at least, I looked at the Cabrillo Festival for so many years from the outside, and I don't know if I suspect all other conductors and music administrators and people in the industry always looked at the Cabrillo Festival because they were always interested in, okay, what is Marin doing? Like, who is Marin working with? What are the composers coming? What are the ideas emerging from this? And one thing that we were going to do this season that was a special tribute. It was to Chris Rouse. And I know that he was very good friends with you, and you've performed a lot of his music and premiered a lot of his music. I only met him very briefly 2 times, actually. Once in Aspen when I was a student, and once in Philadelphia while one of his pieces was premiered. And then I premiered a piece of his, bassoon concerto, but he could not travel to come see the performance with the St. Louis Symphony. So we just exchanged emails and conversations this way. So I didn't have such a close relationship with him, but we were going to perform his final symphony that he wrote, his 6th symphony. And this, having looked at the piece, it's such a beautiful, personal piece, and I know that all of his music was. I remember him telling us in Aspen, he said, "Look, if you play faster and louder, you're probably on the right path to performing my music." But the 6th Symphony is quite different from this. It's very introspective, and he wears his heart on his sleeve a little bit in this piece. And so I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about him, because I know he was also very important to the community, having been there several times.
Yes, I miss him terribly too. It was so serendipitous because when I met Chris, of course, Baltimore wasn't even something on my radar. But Chris was born and raised in Baltimore. And so we ended up, in the end, living about 2 miles apart. And I was able to be with him right up till the end. So it was really, and he turned to me at one point and he said, "Gosh, who would have ever thought you'd be sitting here with me?" It was great. And I would go over and just talk to him. I did a recording, a cycle of the Prokofiev symphonies, and those are quite gnarly and difficult access. And so I would run over to his house with a score and sit down, let me talk to you about this. And he just loved talking about music. And right before he died, he had a huge autograph collection, composers' autographs, huge, enormous, maybe the largest collection by a private individual. And so he knew how much I loved Brahms. And so I have sitting on my shelf the autograph of Brahms that he gave to me. So, for me, he was a great composer, but really just a wonderful friend. And it's almost hard for me to remember back to, I don't know if it was my first year or second year, maybe second year, when we did his trombone concerto. And that was, if you want something tricky to conduct, wow, really, really tough. And I hadn't met him yet. So that was my first encounter with Chris. And how, I'm sure you have the same experience, that you get to know a piece, you look at the score and you start, even if you try not to, you start to develop a picture of the composer, don't you? You think, it's got to be tall with long blonde hair, or, whatever it is, curly hair. And then he showed up and he just seemed like such a regular guy, just a normal guy, liked McDonald's, goes to Disneyland. This was not what I expected at all. And I loved that juxtaposition with him of the highbrow and the lowbrow. But you could speak to him about any piece of music. He knew so much. Unbelievable. He knew all these composers I'd never heard of, introduced me to hundreds, thousands of pieces. From from the time of Beethoven. We're not even talking about contemporary music. And then he had read, we could talk Greek literature, we could talk mythology, we spoke about a lot. He just was an amazing brain. And I think that he also was a very troubled guy, and a conflicted guy. And that's what we hear in his music. And I think that's what draws us in. This, the struggle that we all feel, I think, as we try to become better versions of ourselves. So I can't say enough about his music. I was probably drawn to the loud, faster part of his music originally, but then I think what really sold me is the poetry and of the lyricism. Isn't it amazing? And I also had planned on doing his sixth symphony, but sadly, of course, everything has been postponed. But I hope you'll do it. Will you do it the following summer, next summer?
Yes, absolutely. I will do it because it's he was such an important person to the community as well, and it's also such a beautiful piece. Really, really, what a beautiful piece.
And for us, Christy, for us to be able to take these pieces around the world, it's a real privilege. I find I opened my new position in Vienna with his piece Rapture. And it was something I could feel so passionately about, and the musicians loved it, and the audience, really ate it up. So it's just a great pleasure. But I have to say that unless you decide to try to match me or beat me, I still hold the record of being the only conductor to do an all Rouse program.
Oh, wow.
And I think it was at Cabrillo. It must have been at Cabrillo, right? Where else could it be?
Okay, well, that's a challenge. I will.
There's your challenge. You have to do a Rouse marathon. That's the idea.
Hey, I can see that happening, actually.
Yeah, but 176, it gets really tiresome.
Yeah, I was so tickled and proud, even though I had not much to do with it, but I was just looking at the opening season schedule for Alan's season in Hamburg, and I was so tickled that on his opening concert there, it's a piece that we co-commissioned in my first season with Grand Tetons Music Festival, a piece by Sean Shepard, and I was so happy. And you must have had this happen so many times over the years, but this was the first piece that we co-commissioned. We performed it in Cabrillo as well, and then I took it several other places. We performed it, and then someone else programmed it. Mm-hmm. And for me, this was like, wow! Like I felt like someone gave me a gift, because
it's like they give a job to your child.
That's right. Yeah,
it's like, okay, that couldn't get much better. Oh no, I think that's great. And Sean's such a wonderful composer. What I found also over the years, and I'm sure you'll run into this, is that the musicians become huge advocates for the pieces that they adore and take those back to their orchestras as well.
Yeah, and this happened actually in the first season. We commissioned a piece from Karim Al-Zand, The Prisoner, which was this very political piece about a prisoner from Guantanamo Bay, Adnan Latif, who wrote this letter after being found innocent for 10 years imprisoned, and then tragically committed suicide after the writing of this letter. But Sam, in viola, he said, I love this piece. It's so wonderful. So he took it, and then he proposed it, and it got performed in Minnesota because he took it. So it was so wonderful and you're right, musicians actually have a lot of influence. I feel, and I know that you're open to this as well, but when a musician in my orchestra comes to me and it says, I heard this piece that it's really fantastic, you have to listen to this. I will listen to this a lot more than if I just try to do research on my own. And so many times, you cannot discover everything.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Yeah. Well, another composer that I was very sort of starstruck meeting for the first time but ended up being so open and kind to me as well, and then I performed quite a bit of his music, is John Corigliano, who I know you've performed and you go way back. And I have to say, on a very fun, happy day, if I'm going for a jog, my go-to recording is actually the Red Violin Concerto. and I go and I listen to this, and it's still so beautiful. And I talked to Jeremy Rothman, who I think was at the time working.
Yes, he was with me in Baltimore. Yeah.
So he told me the stress that was associated with getting everything in the can, right, for the recording.
I was not the one stressed. I was okay. I had a couple stressed out artists, so yeah.
But it's such a beautiful recording, and it really is. I mean, I think it captures also how unique and I would listen to John's music and I would say, wow, this is so, and then I would open the score and I would think, wow, I would have never imagined that this is how he wrote it on paper.
His notation, it's so interesting. I think he's one of those composers whose language is so identifiable. You can just hear the signature in his voice. As soon as I hear a piece, I'm, oh, that's got to be John's piece. He's a master of the instrument, the orchestra. He really, really knows. But his unique technique of, for us, we see a lot of triangles with numbers in them. So there's a lot of cueing. And it's interesting because I don't know if you've done his clarinet concerto yet, but it was before he established the triangles. So, he goes up to 13 and I'm like, okay, I'm out of digits. Now what the heck am I supposed to do? So I think he must have had enough conductors who couldn't figure out how to count past 10 that he figured out that system.
Yeah.
Don't you find that atmosphere? I mean, the way he uses percussion, it's just so fantastic.
Yeah, and one of my favorite interactions with him last summer, we did his piano concerto, which was the first orchestral piece that he wrote. Right.
Yes.
So and
I think did I do it there once? I think I did it once years ago, maybe 20 years ago.
I don't know, because this was the one piece that we wanted to give him a birthday present, and
that was the only piece we hadn't done.
We haven't done.
Okay, maybe it was somewhere. Maybe it was in Australia. I can't remember. Yeah. Okay.
Wow, crazy beautiful piece, but so
hard.
Oh my gosh! So we finished the first rehearsal, and he was there, and taking notes and copious, little things. And I go to him and I said, John, how was it? He said, oh my God. He said, I said, what's wrong? He said, I said, what happened to my courage? That's what he tells me. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I just don't write like this anymore. He said, I had so much courage to write like that as a young composer. He said, I didn't know anything. I said, and I just feel like my music has really become more conservative over the years. And I thought, well, his writing has definitely changed, and I think the way he notates music has changed. But I don't know if I would call it conservative. But it was interesting to see that reaction. Do you have a parallel to that in terms of conducting? Like when you look back at, let's say, 30 years ago in your conducting, do you feel like you had more courage in doing something?
No, I just had more ignorance, I think. That's all. I think, as they say, sometimes ignorance is bliss. And maybe one can interpret ignorance as courage as well. I think it, we hope that we improve. I mean, that's our goal always, of course. But I have to share with you that I try to never watch myself conduct if possible, because it's my least favorite pastime on this planet. So I try to steer clear of it if I can.
Yeah. Well, I've been, I've decided to do these sessions with conductors that applied for the.
That's wonderful. And I'm so glad you're continuing the program. It's great.
Well, and I will ask you a couple of questions about it, but so one of the things that I found myself saying over and over to the 90 conductors that I've seen, is conducting really is a process of self-discovery over a period of lifetime. The only problem is it's in front of 2,000 people, right? With something that is so intimate, actually, and it is rather intimate the way that you communicate something that is so deeply personal as the understanding of a Brahms phrase, right? It comes from a personal human point of view. It's not an abstract. I don't actually think much music is meant to be abstract. I think it all connects to us in some way directly. But I do think that with that ignorance that you're talking about is the more you start to know music, which accumulates exponentially in one's brain, I guess, the more you realize how, for me, it just becomes more humbling, the idea of actually stepping in front of an orchestra to actually do that for a living. And then you have the responsibility of new pieces and bringing them to life and then deciding. I mean, how did you deal with the hundreds, literally hundreds of composers that send you music? And I, at first, when I started in Cabrillo, I wanted to see everything. I wanted to talk to everyone. And my manager said, you know what's going to say on your tombstone? It's going to say, he wrote every composer back, and that's a little bit true, because it's such a balance that you have to find in where do you find the time to consider everything? How do you do that? What?
I think that it depends on what level of depth you're going to spend with all of these submissions that one receives. But I guess for me, it never felt a burden. It was always something I enjoyed looking through the score. I just do a cursory. I mean, when you have 100 scores, you don't have time to go into depth with all of them. But I do a cursory, culling, and then end up maybe with 20 scores that I look at. And I have to say that over the years, I probably 5 to 10% of the pieces I programmed were just sent to me cold, from nowhere, because I always felt, as a person, I think who had to really seize every opportunity because there were so few when I was starting in the field. I really understand the value of being taken for where you are, and really not because of where you've been or who you know, but because of your talent. And so I really felt strongly, and I try to continue that, wherever I am, that young composers need to be heard, just like young soloists, young conductors. But it is a lot. The volume is a lot. But I think you learn, or I did learn anyway, how to kind of balance the level of in-depth looking I did. And I think thankfully the staff helped me respond to everyone. I don't think I was able to respond personally.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there are limitations in the number of hours in a day, of course.
Yes.
Do you find this also, because I was surprised actually when we moved to Europe, I was surprised that European orchestras, I think, look at America as being the place where there's a lot more contemporary music and experimentation. And on the flip side, I found American orchestras looking at European orchestras saying, wow, they do tend to do more interesting projects. And I thought it was really odd to see this, that both sides of the Atlantic were having the impression that the other side was doing more contemporary music and wanted to be like that.
Yeah, well, it's quite interesting, because when I left Cabrillo, I didn't anticipate that I would be going to Vienna with a radio orchestra, and you're also with radio orchestra, right? So that it's the same. So our brief includes a lot of contemporary music, and the kind of the style of contemporary music in Europe is very, very different. I find that I love bringing some of those pieces back to the States, and there's still a huge divide, though. I think the ocean still occupies a lot of, at least, terrain up here, even if we can traverse it more easily nowadays. And I find that I'm not sure it's a prejudice, but there's there's a bit of a sense that American contemporary music is too accessible on the part of the Europeans, and there's a bit of a, I think, impression also on the part of Americans that the European contemporary music is a bit too obtuse. So I think it's important that we, as champions and advocates, try to bridge that divide and bring those into perspective and bring the composers from Europe to the States and vice versa. So I've really worked hard, even though I'm only in my first year, to create some kind of receptivity in Vienna for American music, especially.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think it's very important to show people that actually not every composer, not every American composer writes exactly the same thing and
right.
in the same way, because I find the field so varied and so wide that you can really explore. And find diverse voices and unique points of view. So can I come back to this, to the conducting workshop, actually?
Sure, yeah.
Because, I was also so surprised when, of course, I started looking at the conducting workshop and to notice the unbelievable amount of students that were applying for this workshop, and the fact that there are so many conducting students, or not conducting students, but people that want to become conducting students, that are looking at opportunities to work, especially in a festival that focuses on contemporary music. And I know that you set it up this way, and then it became something that the community was really starting to embrace. And now I have so many people that we have so many people that are coming to the masterclass, the open masterclass, and they're all fascinated by what's happening with the conductors and what they do. And it's a wonderful opportunity. Plus, I know that you teach so much in all other areas where you are. So how does one teach conducting? Actually, that's.
But I think you really articulated it well. That it's conducting is. I think you said it's a process of self-discovery. But I would say I'm saying the same thing as you are saying, which is that I think it's really a metaphor for who we are as people. And I think as a teacher, or maybe mentor is a better coach. I'm not sure conducting can actually be taught, but perhaps it can be coached, and one can act as a mentor. I think that it's about trying to unlock the individual to become the best version of themselves, and give them permission to engage with the music in a profound way, and without shyness and without reserve. So, I try to take each student, each young conductor, exactly where he or she is, and look at the person and say, okay, this is great. This is what, and here I see these wonderful strengths. Can you build on those? And maybe you can look at this. So I think it's more a matter of coaching, don't you? It's hard to, and we wouldn't want robots.
Right.
That's the beauty about conducting, is that every conductor looks entirely different, depending on their physique and their language, their gestures. I remember Bernstein used to always say to me, look, don't imitate me. Oh, but do it like this. I think that's really kind of captures it for me.
Yeah. I had a violin teacher who was fascinating, Sergio Luca. And
I know Sergio.
Fascinating this way, because I never finished a piece with him. I studied with him for 3 years. I did a master's degree, and I remember, like, we would start a piece, and then I would come to the next lesson and I would play, and then he would say, okay, you need to do this again, and you need to do this again. So I would come to the next lesson, and then it was far from perfect, you know. And he said, okay, I feel like you understood the concept I was trying to teach you. Now it's your responsibility to take it further if you would like to. And that was it. I was not allowed to bring the piece again in a lesson.
Wow.
And it was fascinating because I feel this is exactly what you're saying about conducting. You know, you can in some way present the possibilities that one has, but it is really who they are that then make that next step.
Definitely, and I think that's really that was really interesting what you're saying. I think that the young conductors who really sort of get my brain on fire and I get it really excited about are the ones that actually then take everything we give them and work it in and transform it and take the piece to the next level. So I think that's what Serge was doing, you know, in terms of your violin playing. It's a fascinating thought. I'm going to think about it more.
Yeah, because it ends up, what do you do with it your own that defines, I guess. Yeah,
but that's the key with conducting, isn't it? Even more so with than with an instrument. I mean, an individual instrument. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So, of course, I think it's amazing just like reading through your bio or glancing through a little bit, knowing what you've done and everything. It's amazing because, and what is amazing about it is that at every point I feel like, you've done, this was the first time that a woman conductor did this, or this, it was unbelievable, right? And that, and I think I speak for everybody in the industry, when I say that this, I mean, there's so much respect, and I hope that you feel this from all my colleagues. There's so much respect with the fact that you have really have transformed this industry, especially in a time right now where I feel like we are finally starting to really look back and trying to say, hey, wait a second, like we, should have done things differently a long time ago. And I just wanted to get your take on especially what's happening right now in terms of how do we go even further and address the diversity of what's necessary even further, and what are some of, because you've always been the trailblazer, right? And what you've done, and how are you thinking about the next challenge?
I think this is an important moment, certainly a crossroads for so many of us, to really rethink how we've done things. We're not a fantastic group of people to look at how we can innovate what we do. We like to do everything. We've got the subscription, and then we do this and this. We've always done it this way. That's how we're doing it. I'm a person that likes to say, well, why are we doing it that way still? I'm a great believer that tradition is just the last bad idea. It just got stuck. So why don't we constantly question ourselves? But I think that sometimes that's the way I live my life, and it's tiring for me, but I think it's extremely exhausting for others sometimes to have me constantly questioning. But that said, I've been very deeply, deeply troubled by the lack of diversity in our industry, on stage especially, for probably 30 years. And when I took over with the Baltimore Symphony in my second year in 2008, I finally just said, look, if I don't start something to create access and opportunity for people of color, I don't know who else is going to do it. So I started a program with 30 first graders and called Orchids. And now we have over 2,000 kids playing musical instruments. And, I'm still eager, before I finish with the Baltimore Symphony, to push them into investing further in these kinds of initiatives and try to take that's something that people have a difficult time doing, take the long view. Don't just think of yourself and what you can get out of it, but think about your kids and think about the next generations. And how do we want classical music to survive? Do we want the symphony orchestra to be part of the future? Then let's look at how it can evolve. But these discussions are maybe it's human nature. Yeah, I think I was wondering why there weren't more women on the podiums for decades. Where is everybody? And it took the Me Too movement to really start to open some doors. And for me, that's quite sad in a way, that it takes some kind of, it takes forcing people to have no choice rather than feeling compelled to want to do this and to want to be inclusive. So maybe this is our moment to transform how we think about art, how we think about music in society, how we think about the future that we're going to create. I hope that we can all think in a more open and generous way.
Yeah, I remember looking at the Orc Kids program when you started, and I remember thinking, okay, this is such a of course, this is something that needs to happen. It's impossible to just expect for someone to compete, with someone that has received access to education versus someone that has not, and then you can just simply put up your hands and say, well, they have to be competitive in a way,
right,
without providing the platform,
right.
And I think you started so early in your career addressing the female conductors question as well, and creating a platform where they were encouraged and
yeah, I started a fellowship in 2002 and called the Taki Fellowship, and what's been so wonderful during this lockdown time is that we've all been gathering, all 24 of the awardees, and we've been gathering twice a week on calls and really creating and enjoying a sense of community. And, I realized that that's another very important issue for people who are in the minority in these situations, that without a sense of community, it's very, very hard to be successful. And so I think we also have to be sensitive to that it's not enough to just have one person of color. You really need to have a community of people and also be open to our own unspoken and unconscious bias and how that plays into everything. So I'm really trying, I've spent the past few weeks really reading a lot and trying to study and educate myself. And, I feel just that I'm a novice in all of this still.
Yeah, I think we all have a lot of thinking and learning to do. I think we're all there with you and trying to find this. Well, I think. First of all, thank you for taking the time to.
Oh yeah, anytime, really.
Chat, a little bit about this. I know that Cabrillo was made special by your tenure. I know that it has a special place in your heart. That matter. Now I share in that same.
That's good. We're all right here together.
Family, in the same family, in a way. So this. I think.
But I'm so glad it's going so well, and that you're able to really make it your own. And I only wish it were a year long, and then we could share. 2 weeks is just not enough time.
I know you probably had this conversation at the end of every festival, where it's like, really, is it just, can it be longer,
Yeah, but then you look at how exhausted especially the staff, they run themselves ragged. So I think maybe it's not possible, but yeah, who knows? Maybe in the future.
And I honestly did not even realize when I started my first season, I was like, there are so many things that are happening. I was like, how do you pack them in 2 weeks where you have, like, I mean, the workshop by itself.
Yeah, that would be enough.
That would be enough.
And then we start. Yeah, that's right.
I wish everyone could go through Cabrillo to experience that.
I do too. And that's what, I would say if I miss the composers, I miss the community, but I really miss the orchestra.
Yeah.
But carry on. Keep up the great work. And you got my number, so you know where I am. Anytime.
All right. Thank you so much, Marin. Appreciate
Pleasure.
it.
Pleasure. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello, my name is Anna Clyne and I'm delighted to be a part of the Cabrillo Festival's 2020 virtual online season. We'll be sharing a piece with you called Rift, which was premiered back in 2016 as part of Marin Alsop's final season at the Cabrillo Festival. It was a real honour and very exciting to be a part of this special occasion, and Rift is actually a symphonic ballet that combines the orchestra with dance and was created in collaboration with choreographer Kitty McNamee and her Hysterica dance company and lighting designer Tom Ontiveros. It's really interesting to be reflecting on this particular piece now, as it has more of a relevance in many ways to today than we could ever have imagined. The piece is inspired by some personal experiences. Back in 2015, I was in Paris for the premiere of a new work called This Midnight Hour on November 13th, which devastatingly was also the night of the Paris attacks. This happened whilst I was in the concert, and my hotel was actually on the same block as the Bataclan, the music venue where so many people were tragically killed. So I was in Paris during this very unsettling time, and actually the couple of days after I was in Paris, and someone let off firecrackers and they thought it was ammunition, and everyone was running through the streets. It was chaotic, it was frightening, people running into shops and cafes for shelter, and this experience really left a strong mark on me. So this chaos, this anger and this energy is very much central to Rift. Another experience I had whilst I was in Paris is on the day after these horrific attacks. I was walking in Paris and I was walking past a church and I heard this very beautiful soft music coming from it, and I went and I sat in a pew and I listened to this lady who was singing the Mass, the Sanctus, for solo voice, and I recorded this on my phone. And actually the first music that you'll hear in Rift is a transcription of this Sanctus, which starts with just solo viola and then it builds and builds until we have this a lot of energy, creating the first movement of Rift, which is actually, even though it's in one broad brushstroke, it's really separated into three subsections. The first is dust, the second is water, and the third is space. In the first act of Dust, we have this very sort of somber reflection on the chaos and destruction that's so prevalent in the world today. And then this gradually gains lots of energy, referring back to this experience in Paris, until there's a lot of chaos, and then it snaps into Act 2, which is Water, where we have this duet between two of the dancers, a kind of snaky duet, which then has a loud outburst of sound and physical energy, and then it melts towards this beautiful, tender duet, which is almost a sort of a cleansing, of a healing of this destruction, with water being a very central image. This then projects into the third act, which is called Space. And in this one, we sort of go back in time to a more sort of refined, Baroque-like orderly structure, a sort of refined beauty. And we have a very tender duet between two of the dancers. And then after that, we're then propelled into the future with more of an optimistic ending to the piece, trying to leave the audience in a more positive note, having had this quite emotional roller coaster of an experience. So as I said before, this piece Rift has really taken on a meaning that's more relevant today than we really could have imagined. One thing that I really love about Kitty's choreography is that she has brought in dancers from a lot of different backgrounds. We have 6 dancers, but only 3 of them are actually ballet dancers. And the dancers also come from a very different cultures and their different choreographic styles, which gives a really fresh, dynamic, inclusive, diverse visual to this music. So it was a real delight to create this work. The process was also really fascinating. I, at the time, was based in Brooklyn, and Kitty was based in, and still is based in, Los Angeles. So I would write sections of the music, then send that to her, and then she would create choreography to that, send video back to myself, and then we had this sort of relay between the music and the dance until finally the piece emerged. So it was really exciting to share with this back in 2016 at the Cabrillo Festival, and we're delighted that we'll have an opportunity to share it this year, 2020, for the Cabrillo Festival's 2020 virtual season. Thank you so much.